Do you know like the single event or what happened in like the 60s when like the World Economic Forum and like banned funding nuclear energy? Like when did this cold start? And
Yeah.
why does it come back?
Yeah. So it happened for a lot of complex reasons. It was, again, narrative, nuclear weapons, nuclear weapon proliferation, nuclear energy. That was a lot for the layman to digest, right? And there wasn't. I have to imagine the education back then on nuclear energy was probably not as caught up. All they had was probably history of, hey, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, atomic bombs. We're in game theory, mode. It's never ending with Russia. We're in the Cold War. And so just that fear kind of creeps up into the psyche. Mm-hmm. And then at the same time, you have a lot of environmentalist NGOs, groups out there that were starting to spew this narrative. I mean, because they're ultimately more, it was like the hippie thing. They were more anti-nuclear weapons. But again, the narrative didn't allow people to bifurcate between the two, and there wasn't enough education to really understand. There was some who did, but then, okay, so there wasn't really a bifurcation of the education. People look at, oh, hey, yeah, nuclear weapons. Oh, if we have these reactors, somebody can, enrich uranium and make nuclear bombs, like that's how you think it. And I don't blame people. But then now compound that with Chernobyl. Terrible media handling, poor handling by the Soviet regime because, again, Cold War, they didn't want to look stupid. So withheld information from the public. But then, or like everyone outside of Russia. And so they try to keep it a secret. It gets a little bit worse. Then they're like, hey, this is bad. Something bad happened. But even then, the reality, the real data, the hard data versus the narrative were completely they weren't even in the same world. Mm-hmm. And I think a great example of that, just watch, if you've watched Chernobyl on HBO, you see I love television. I thought Chernobyl and HBO is just the best at writing. And when I first watched Chernobyl, my God, I was scared. Mm-hmm. It was such an eerie weirdness. But in reality, a lot of people, the numbers, the kind of, what actually took place, and I'm sure there was actual horrid things that had happened at the time, but what was told to people, the message that was conveyed to people, it made it sound like there was another Hiroshima. It was that level of magnitude of fear. It was like Hiroshima and Nagasaki, except on accident, except the nuclear reactor. And so that spreads. And we don't have internet, or at least it's not accessible then. Actually, no, it's 1986. So internet, there's not the World Wide Web. The only people who know how to even connect to anything from a digital perspective
or like fucking the Midwest somewhere.
They're Bill Gates.
Yeah.
And
Mark Andreessen.
Mark Andreessen and
Idaho.
And Steve Jobs. So that information isn't there. The only thing you can go to is a library or your radio. And going off the radio, I don't know if you remember or ever heard about the first time the movie The War on Worlds was broadcasted.
Didn't people freak out like in bunkers or some shit?
People thought like it was actually like the end of the world. Yeah, actually happening.
Yeah.
So think about that situation, and then not too long after 3 Mile Island, even though nobody actually died from 3 Mile Island. That's the thing. The only nuclear meltdown that has ever happened in the United States, nobody died. I think a handful of people went to the hospital. No one nothing in return happened. It wasn't anything like, oil spills and all these other things that have happened. But so, okay, coming back to my point, you have media, the narrative, it's so strong. And so nuclear energy, even though it is for the utility of mankind, it is aligned with nuclear weapons. And so people are trying to separate the two, but it's proving to be difficult. Then you have 3 Mile Island, then you have Chernobyl. And then on top of that, oil and gas was, they saw an opportunity to remove a competitor at the time. Mm-hmm. Oil and gas now was one of the biggest proponents of bringing back nuclear.
That's what I found. It's interesting that Texas has 10%. That you would have thought that they would have very much made sure that didn't happen because it's their backyard.
Yeah. And Texas has been for a long time pro-nuclear. Our prior governor, Rick Perry, I'd probably give him credit for really sparking it. But at the same time, one of the most influential, not talked about too much, but one of the inflection points of the nuclear industry was George Bush, when he declassified a lot of the advanced reactor research, that I think it was like in 2006. Mm-hmm. So a lot of these files of all these other designs other than light water reactor or the pressure water reactor now were available to the public. That's another thing too, because that gives you another example, right? It was so contentious idea, even research that would have benefited the public to know. Maybe we would have had all these companies 20 years ago, mm-hmm. but it wouldn't have existed because, those designs just didn't exist. And maybe you could work on those experiments. Mm-hmm. I think those experiments were only happening at national laboratories or somewhere in, Area 51 with the DOD.
Yeah.
So aside from that, you had to have high level access or authorization.
What's crazy too is that the only thing that people associate, because of the media, the only thing that people associate George Bush and nuclear with is his inability to pronounce the word. You know what I mean? You go ask anybody on the street and they would make a joke, versus he's the guy who actually might have been the inflection point for this whole industry that might allow us to have sustainable energy into the future.
Yeah. And so he did his part, but again, so George Bush from Texas, who was also governor at the same time, Rick Perry, who also Rick Perry, Secretary of Energy at the time. He was former governor of Texas. He actually was running for president at the time, but Secretary of Energy was what he landed on. And he was a big proponent of, hey, we need to, unleash atomic energy again. And then, so Texas has always been pro-nuclear. I think the only thing that is deviated is how much our government representatives could speak about it publicly, depending on popularity. Obviously, after Fukushima, we had to go quiet again. Fukushima was almost a death knell to nuclear industry. I mean, it was the death knell to the nuclear industry in Germany, and Germany now is paying for it in real time as we sit right here. So, but yeah, Texas, always pragmatic about energy,